police to have a date at a selected time, and the police were there and interviewed him, and that's when the house of cards were falling. It's like dominoes. I mean, just stacked dominoes. They were going down.
I'm living at my mother's, and the police called and said, "We have some photos we'd like to show you. We want to talk to you more about who you were attacked by." So they came out to my mother's house, and they had, I guess you'd call them mugshots. So I was looking through the book, and so I was able to identify him in that book. I mean, when I looked in that mugshot, I don't know anything about him. I just said, that's the guy. He's very distinctive looking. I remember at the time, afterwards thinking, that asshole, he had red hair. I have red hair. Redheads are not supposed to be picking on redheads. That was one of my crazy thoughts at the time. But he did. He had the sandy, really short hair, what I call ice blue eyes, and these kind of really heavy-lidded little eyes. And yeah, I mean, it's not that appearances are indicative, but he was a regular guy. He was an electrician. He was married. He had 2 kids. I mean, who knew? I got this thing, I'm just full of jargon. It's only what I've learned through the years. And this jargon is that I got survivor's guilt. Like, oh, that's what that is. I'm alive and those other women are dead. A couple of reporters took me down in the garage and they put this microphone on my face and say, "So, why are you alive and those other women are dead?" Just like that. And I really got very tearful. And then I thought, I had a really sucky childhood. And I knew, I recognized something that day, whether it was reminiscent. I'm not saying my dad and my grandfather were serial killers, but they were very abusive to my mother and my grandmother and the women in our family. That next night, or that night, I don't remember which, I ended up in a terrible bar on Southeast 82nd Street out in what I call the Deliverance part of Portland. And it was a misnamed bar. It's called the Lucky Chance or something like that. And I literally met my next husband, which was so appropriate, like right then. And I think between the two of us, we drank something like, 17 martinis, but who's counting? Life just got darker after that. So whether I was drinking that night because, hey, I am alive, and of course I still don't know what I had escaped, but it was just one more time of violence in my life. And that violence somehow opened the door to much worse violence. And I became a battered wife. My children became victims in my life. It was just a very dark period. I was not making good choices in those days. We stayed married 7 years, and then one day you wake up and say, "Well, I don't think this is working anymore."
Jerome Brudos would have some of his victims dressed in, say, a slip that they might have been wearing, or a slip that he put on them while they're still alive. And then he would put a mirror on the ground so that he could snap a photo where the mirror would show what was visible up under their slip.
He could look into the mirror and then he could see the reflection from her groin area. So he took a picture of it. Well, he also took a picture of himself that's in that mirror. So you can actually see it's actually Jerry Brudos. And that photograph was big as far as a piece of evidence.
He claimed that wasn't him, but I would beg to differ. Having seen him, having seen pictures of him, and having seen that picture was significant because it helped to convict him.
He kidnapped her on a ruse and took her to his residence in Salem, got her into his private workshop that he had. There's pictures that he took of her before he killed her. And she's standing in the nude in his garage. She has a look of somewhat of approval on her face. And that's called fear paralysis. In other words, she knew she was in trouble. He told me that she did everything that she could, tell him, don't shoot me, please don't shoot me.
When you look at that, you look at her eyes are just dead. She's looking at you in this photograph. You realize she is still biologically alive, but I think of it as in her head, grabbed off the streets, captured by a stranger, held without clothing, stretched up to this rafter. She knows that she's already dead. And I think what's happened upstairs in her brain, every circuit breaker has been blown, and she's not there anymore.
And she's doing nothing. And I thought, there but for the grace of all of us could we be. She would die shortly after that. But that's what he did. He took photographs of his victims in various poses, dead and alive. And I'm still very sad about it. Very sad that there are the parents of those girls that will never get to be grandparents. I have 11 grandchildren and a great-grandson. And that would never be the experience of those young women's family. They didn't get to have those things.
I think Jerome Brudos took those pictures because it aroused him. And I think that having tortured a woman, he wanted to be able to go back and relive the torture, even though to camouflage his murders, he had to dispose of the body parts and dispose of these young women in the most horrific way. But having those photos allowed him to go back and look at the photos and relive the experience of torturing these women.
Frequent sex was part of it. but it was more control. Think about it. They're dead. He controls them. He can do anything that he wants. So it's that act of humiliation. It's the act of, for lack of, and I don't know a better word, but to sort of, dehumanize. It's part of the hate. They can't fight back. They can't talk back. I'm in control in every aspect of your life. So to him, in a lot of ways, they were still alive. And he actually wanted a cave. He wanted a private place like a dungeon, which a lot of serial murderers do. I can name several that have done this across the United States. A cellar of horror, where they could take their victims and the victims could scream all that they wanted to. And they would never be able to be heard. And they couldn't be rescued. And that was his dream.
So what I discovered was that I was really, what's the word? Blessed? Lucky? My favorite word is blesky. That's a combination of blessed and lucky. For the non-religious types like me, I like that a lot. And felt, wow, so this is what I escaped. If I don't really have a clue why some people get to live and why some people don't, I do know, I strongly believe that my shitty childhood helped me survive Jerome Brutos. I believe I saw some things in his eyes, and I knew that I didn't say, well, I'm not going with him. It wasn't like that. It was just too fast. It was just this gut instinct that said, no.